I'm Megan Mance with the Homeland Security and Defense Forum, and we have a truly excellent program in store for you today with leadership from U.S. Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, the Department of Homeland Security, and industry. And as requirements change along the border and technology continues to accelerate, we'll be looking at a range of topics to help the stakeholder community better support the border security mission. And I want to thank our premier partner for today's event, GDIT. And it is my pleasure to welcome Ben Gianni, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer with GDIT, for some welcoming remarks. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Megan. Let me grab my book out of my pocket and I'll dive into this. No, seriously. Megan, thanks so much for working with us and the opportunity to sponsor today's event. On behalf of the General Dynamics family and the businesses there, including the technologies business that we're from, we recognize such an expansive and complex mission being discussed today. We also recognize the value of the dialogue. It's an essential dialogue to include industry and the mission, and we appreciate you doing that and look forward to that continuing. I don't have much to say, but except for thank you for supporting organizations like this, and thank you for support of the mission. And I look forward to the panels and the rich dialogue that we're going to hear. So, on behalf of General Dynamics and Technologies and GDIT, let's have a good session. Thank you.
And thank you, Ben. We're so grateful for GDIT's support. And I do want to recognize our other event partners today for making this possible. DeGero, Microsoft Federal, Peraton, SAIC, Red Hat, ServiceNow, Thundercat Technology, and Dell Technologies. And I would like to thank the great folks here at the AT&T Forum for making this space available to us. So let's just give them a quick round of applause. Thank you. I do want to recognize our honorary chair for this event, Commissioner David Aguilar. As many of you know, Mr. Aguilar is the former acting commissioner and deputy commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection and former chief of Border Patrol. He currently serves as founder of the DVA Group, and HSDF is so grateful for his support and thought leadership, not just for today's event, but throughout the year. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Chief Aguilar to the stage for some opening remarks, and he's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we're going to jump into a fireside chat with current Chief of Border Patrol, Jason Owens. So welcome, Commissioner.
Each progressive chief that takes over for the United States Border Patrol has an evolving challenge, an evolving complexity, and an evolving importance. Today, our chief here is first and foremost a friend. We've known each other for many, many years. He's a partner and he's a peer. I know exactly what his thoughts are, but it's critically important that industry hear from him on his vision, his thoughts, the direction that he would like to take the Border Patrol in, and what the requirements are going to be. That kind of entails the conversation we're going to have today to kick off the event, but especially to follow through throughout the rest of the day. So, Chief, again, thank you very much for being with us today. Really appreciate it and looking forward to a great discussion this morning. I'm going to ask the Chief to join me up here. And I would like, as we have in the past, begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Shall we? Okay. Let's move on over here. Well, Chief, again, thanks for being here with us. Really appreciate it. It's always an honor to have you here. And I want to repeat that the complexity, the difficulties of the job that the Chief does are just that. Not only important, but difficult, complex, and very different from where we feel very comfortable operating in the field versus operating up here. And you'll get a sense of that as we move on this morning. So, Chief, why don't we begin by you kind of opening up with giving us a state of the border, what your thoughts are on what's happening today to kind of start us off a little bit.
Well, thank you, Chief. And so you guys heard that Chief Aguilar was the former acting commissioner of CBP, but to those of us that grew up with him as the chief, he will always be chief. So that's why that's a title that he carries with him into retirement, and it's somebody that I looked up to a lot coming up. So to have the chance to sit here with him as peers is a little unnerving.
For me.
But it also brings to light an important fact about us as an organization. So, relatively speaking, not just the Border Patrol as it is today, but CBP and the Department of Homeland Security are young agencies compared to all the others, the other departments and the agencies that exist. And so in many ways, we're still finding our way, determining how we're going to be, who we're going to be. That's an exciting time to be part of any organization. And I think CBP is one of those that we didn't realize what we had initially, and what it's becoming is something that's really amazing. If you can imagine an organization, an agency that is not just responsible for keeping this country, its people, and our way of life safe at the border and beyond, but also facilitating all lawful trade and travel for the entire country, the second largest revenue generator for the entire nation, behind the IRS. And I'd like to say we're probably more well-liked than the IRS. And so when we all came together to form these legacy agencies, came together to form what is today CBP, everybody had a very defined lane, a very defined role that we were going to accomplish. And today, in a good way, those lines are starting to blur. Those lines are starting to come together, and we're starting to see that legacy piece drop away, fall away. And you have people that are part of CBP today that know nothing of the legacy agencies that, as they used to exist. That's a very good thing for us and the mission that we're trying to accomplish. The state of the border compared to when I started, and I see Sal Zamora back there, and I see there's a number of faces here, Chief Aguilar, that when we went out and did this job, immigration and narcotics was pretty much all we focused on. We were responsible for anything and everything that came in between the ports of entry illegally. And if you came into contact with somebody wearing a green uniform, it was probably because you did something wrong. Our agency was largely unknown. People had heard of the Border Patrol, maybe, didn't really understand what we did or who we are. That all changed post 9/11. And our mission actually took a pivot, and it went from one of just immigration to now we're looking for serious threats in the terrorism realm. Now we're looking for serious threats in TCOs and this organization that are our adversaries. And that's something that a lot of people don't, or they take for granted. It's not the flow, it's not the migrants or the people coming across that represent the adversaries to the Border Patrol or CBP. It is the people that orchestrate it. It's the transnational criminal organizations, it's the cartels, it's the smugglers, it's the facilitators of that flow. That's who we see as our adversary. And whereas back in the day what we saw was largely the economic migration from countries like Mexico or the Northern Triangle, and they would come in, they would work seasonal, and they would send remittance payments back home, and they'd go home for the holidays and then try again. We were very busy during our time. San Diego and the Rio Grande Valley, we were catching, hundreds, if not thousands of people per shift as well. But it was a very different dynamic because processing was very easy. There was really one pathway that was used. It was a voluntary return. Everybody went back to Mexico, and generally they turned right around and tried again. And we would see them sometimes a couple, 3 times per shift until we quit seeing them. That's not the case today. Today, every single year, we are catching people from between 100 and 120 countries, from all over the world. Processing these individuals is so much more complex. There is no real voluntary return. The pathways that we have to use are under scrutiny. It takes anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours to process one case, whereas before it may take just a matter of minutes. And so even though the numbers have been this high in times past, the way that we deal with that flow is so much more complex. That's that brings the need for being able to do these pathways faster so that we can get back to the business of the border security mission. What I like to tell people, our job over the years has become a bifurcated one. We have the migration flow that is unfortunately coming between the ports of entry. Those that want to come into this country and make this place their home, they need to have pathways so that they can do it lawfully and safely. We need to be able to take them out of the hands of the criminals and smugglers and allow them to apply for admission and enter through our front door, which are the ports of entry. And the reason why that matters to the United States Border Patrol is because as long as they are not, they are coming between the ports of entry, and that forces us to address that flow. And what that does is takes us off of the border security mission. And make no mistake about it, our adversaries, those TCOs, those criminals, those smugglers, are taking advantage of that every single day to cross other things in areas where they now know that we are not. That's our mission in a nutshell. The other bifurcation is the national security or the border security mission. And I feel like that gets lost in the narrative sometimes because we start talking about, all we talk about is that flow. If you turn on the news right now and you see anybody covering the situation on the border, what do you see? Eagle Pass, Lukeville, and the thousands of migrants that are coming across in those areas. Well, that's important, but not because of what they may say in the media, but because of what it represents for us on the border security side. They're taking us off of task. For the smugglers, for the cartels, for the criminals, it is a money-making opportunity every step of the way. Now, I came from Del Rio sector before I assumed this job, and so I know this number. The weekly illicit revenue just for human smuggling in 1 week in one sector of 9 along the southwest border for just human smuggling was in excess of $35 million. Now, if you do the math, and I'm from Oklahoma, so forgive me if I'm wrong, about $1.5 billion a year just in one sector and just off of human smuggling. We're not talking about narcotics. We're not talking about bulk cash. We're not talking about special interest migrants, any of the other money-making pathways that these smugglers have. And we're not talking about the revenue that's being generated in sectors like San Diego, RGV, Laredo, Tucson. It is a huge money-making opportunity, and that money funnels right back into destabilizing the communities on the south side of the border in Mexico and to fight us. That's the situation on the border as it is today.
So, starting there, Chief, one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is what's going to happen when this country again gets back to asking the Border Patrol to taking back the border. Right now, the pathways, as you described them, are in very defined areas of operation, urban areas of operation for all practical purposes. But as you and I know, the Border Patrol operates in urban, rural, and remote areas of operation. When we start going back to the border to basically conduct Border Patrol operations as we knew them, the diffusion of the flows are going to be throughout in those rural and remote areas of operations. We talked earlier, some of the challenges that we had when we were in the field are still there. These so-called dark areas where we have no communications. Communications now for industry has gone from just voice communication to voice, video, and data, which becomes critically important once you are able to add in the AI and ML. Where do you see the Border Patrol going in that communications requirements that we have, and what do you think industry needs to hear on those challenges continue today?
So it's funny, anytime I get asked, I try and put things very succinctly, kind of the elevator pitch, so to speak. Two things are a priority for me at the highest level. Number one, does it help my men and women do their job better and more efficiently? Number two, does it help them get home safe at the end of every shift? If the answer is yes to one or both of those, then I'm interested. So when we talk about the communications piece, and David and I were talking about it in the green room earlier, we never imagined or envisioned a world where the migrants would be chasing the Border Patrol agents to turn themselves in. It just antithetical to everything that we've ever known. We're here today, but we don't expect that situation to exist. One of the years from now, one of these days, the situation will go back to the way that it was before, where people that are breaking the law are trying to evade capture from law enforcement because there is a consequence for breaking the law. When that happens, our men and women will find themselves once again back out in those remote locations dealing with the same flow, but it's a flow that is trying to evade capture. And unlike what, we talked about this before also, unlike what you see on TV and what Hollywood portrays, we don't have the ability to vector in satellites and use, on a dime and have cameras secretly posted all throughout the border. There are still today, despite the leaps and bounds forward in cell phone communications and satellite communications, so many areas of the border that don't have dependable cell phone coverage, that don't have effective radio coverage, that are largely unmonitored. We don't have cameras and sensor technology throughout the entirety of the almost 2,000 miles of U.S. border with Mexico, the more than 5,000 miles of U.S. border with Canada. We're not even talking about Alaska. That's a whole different discussion. The thousands upon thousands of miles of coastal borders that we have. Everybody focuses on just the border with Mexico, but we have to remember the border environment represents so much more. I can tell you when I was in Laredo, I used to say this number a lot. We had at one time 170 miles of border, and this is an urban border area comparatively. At any given time, despite the fact that you have one of the largest trade zones in the world there, I could get persistent surveillance on about 30% of that 170 miles. The unknown is very real. You see on the news, we talk about the known gotaways. We want to make sure that we're always given accurate information about what we're seeing. And so all we can talk about is what we know. So we know the flow that we actually apprehend, and we know the flow that we're able to, in some ways, detect, but we couldn't get to. And then we get into the whole tip of the iceberg theory. What's getting away that we're not seeing? If you know that all you need to do is turn yourself in, go through one of the pathways that are established, and in all likelihood, be released at least for a period of time before your court date, what possible reason would you have for trying to put your life at risk and evade capture through some of the most remote and austere terrain on the planet? Could it be that those are the individuals that we need to be worried about? Could it be those are the individuals that have the criminal backgrounds, that have the bad intent? Those are the individuals that my men and women are going to find themselves encountering as they get out there into those remote areas more and more. And so going back to the original question, simple communications, dependable, effective communications to keep them safe. The access to the information and the data so they know who's in front of them is going to be everything to us.
Yeah. Continuing that thread there, knowing who's in front of them, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, we had OIT Assistant Commissioner and the CTO for CBP. We talked about edge computing, basically having, whether it's a rural or remote areas of operation, having that information at their fingertips. ATAC now is pretty much prevalent throughout the Border Patrol. Still some growth to do there. But what else would you say is going to be, what translates to that mobile edge computing that we need?
So a couple of things. First off, so most of you that have been in the game for a while, you remember we have something, we have simple cameras and scope trucks, and when we would go out there and operate them, they were the simple Atari joysticks. And then a few years later, as a pack, I saw they had the Game Boy controllers, which took me out of the equation. I couldn't, Now, everything is done on this. I remember going into my son's room. He's in the Navy now, and he had a big 42-inch TV that was turned off and dark in his room. He's watching YouTube videos on this little phone. They get all of their information and news, and I say that because that's the generation that's wearing this uniform today. That's what they know. That's what they understand, and it's on us if we can't figure that out and make the technology accessible accordingly. So the ATAC, that platform is what's working really well for them right now. It's how do we make that better? How do we bring more to them on these devices? I don't think you're going to find, or you'd be hard pressed to find, many other agencies out there that have as much or have access to as much information as CBP. Think about this. We are the front line that make all the contacts, both legal and illegal. We have access to all the databases and systems. We have the more expansive, biometrics and camera technology out there. The ability to process that and analyze it and crunch it into meaningful information that can be used to leverage operations and officer safety. That's where AI starts to come into play. That's where, when it arrives to our men and women in a processed and not a raw format, helps make them safer. We talk about the expanse, and I talked about the thousands upon thousands of miles of border, but we also talk about away from the border as well. Our theaters of operation are not just at the border and done. We have egress routes that we cover down on with checkpoints. We work the ranch lands away from the border. We work south of the border. Having that autonomous capability for the surveillance to identify and be able to determine if it's actually a threat or if it's traffic or not, instead of having a person have to sit in front of every monitor, those are meaningful force multipliers that make sure that I can get more Border Patrol agents where I need them the most, which is out on patrol. Those are some of the things I think are important.
There you go. So one of the things that is still capturing a lot of attention is the so-called fence, smart fence. Fence infrastructure supported by appropriate technology. Where are we on that? Do we need more of it? How do you see that working into the script that you gave of data, video communications? To what degree do we need to extend that?
So first and foremost, if you think of a hub and spoke concept, everything revolves around the men and women that wear this uniform that are out there in the field. Everything else is a force multiplier. Without them, nothing else matters. Whether we're talking about a physical barrier, whether we're talking about a virtual fence, whether we're talking about infrastructure that enables them to respond to these remote areas, whether they're talking about detection or surveillance capabilities, those are all force multipliers. And used in the right place at the right time are of great benefit. So there are areas along the border where I will tell you, and I think any chief or any agent that's ever worn this uniform will tell you, yes, a physical barrier makes perfect sense right here. Why? Because it extends that vanishing point. It gives us more time to detect and respond to that traffic, which increases the certainty of arrest. If you put that same fence out in the middle of nowhere, it won't be as effective. Out in the middle of nowhere, maybe I need roads to respond and I need the camera technology to detect it. Because of the nature of the location, I may have hours to respond to and interdict that traffic. So this idea that there's a panacea or that there's an all or nothing silver bullet that's going to solve all of our problems, no. And if you hear this same comeback that show me a 30-foot fence, I'll show you a 31-foot ladder, true, but nobody's saying it's going to stop the traffic. The idea as a tool for Border Patrol agents is to extend that time that we have to detect, respond to, and interdict that traffic. It makes it more difficult. So you see, in that way, everything revolves around that agent being able to leverage that tool and respond to and interdict. The same can be said when we're talking about the very remote locations, the desert lands of South Texas, the ranch lands of South Texas, rather, where in that situation, because of the vegetation and the environment, altitude is your friend. The ability to be able to look down and see what's going on and vector in our agents, and they have a meaningful response capability to get to that traffic, that's going to be much more meaningful than a physical barrier. Now, that's the traditional traffic that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing you're going to ask me about the emerging threats. I'll let you get there.
Go ahead. Go right into it.
So now we have a very capable and nimble adversary in the cartels who, as I described before, are very well funded. They are starting to leverage things like unmanned aircraft, drones, in a very scary way. Some of the videos that I've seen that we have a counter UAS program that needs to continue to develop and get better to keep up with the adversary. The counter surveillance that they do on us is something that keeps me up at night. The way that they can use these drones to move contraband across our border keeps me up at night. So we're not just talking about a physical wall, we're talking about the ability to deal with threats like that they come up with. We have our own unmanned aircraft capability, the Border Patrol does, and it's very effective in providing us our own air support. But with an adversary that has a mind, and I actually saw video of cartel on cartel violence where they used the grappling hook device that was at the bottom of the drone and dropped homemade bombs on another cartel's camp. At the same video segment, I saw one of their drones hovering above one of the CBP helicopters who were providing air support to my men and women on the ground. How hard would it be for that little drone to fly into that helicopter, or worse, do something to our men and women on the ground? These are very, very real threats. And the number of incursions that take place weekly would scare you. That's the type of threat that we need to be thinking about today, because it's already here.
So, Chief, one of the things that you covered was the amount of money that's being made in just one sector. Multiply that by the 9 southwest border sectors, the northern border sectors, maritime, Puerto Rico, everything else that we work. I go back to the day that we start taking our border back, the threats that you just described are going to become more real, more real time. Industry, you have to be thinking about this. You have to be thinking about this, because that's what our men and women are going to be facing. Is there anything that you would add to that? Because one of the things I've talked about in the past, unfortunately, and I believe this is correct, not in a bad way, but we have now grown a generation of Border Patrol agents since about 2012, 2013. The UAC started family units, asylum, and everything else that, frankly, don't know the border the way that we used to train them, because we've got them focused on what they need to be doing. The day is going to come that we're going to ask those men and women to do the job that used to be done, and we're going to train them up. To me, training is a big part of what's coming down that pathway.
100%. And remind me to talk about fentanyl
Okay.
in a second. But so the job of a Border Patrol agent is it almost blends the law enforcement with some of the infantry type functions. They go out into, like I said, the most remote and austere terrain in the country, if not in the world. Most times their backup, if they know where they are several minutes from responding. Those of you that have been in law enforcement or a firefight, you know that seconds matter. So they're already in a bad situation. And when you're talking about back in the times when we were out there every day, the advantage we had is that we knew the terrain, we knew the area. We could use that to our advantage. At least initially, that's not going to be the case as we start to get back out into these areas. And generally, when you start to push back on a phenomenon or thing that has been happening for quite some time, the level of resistance goes up. We get the word, it gets worse before it gets better. They'll start pushing back. The violence will start to escalate before we actually start to take control of it again, and we start to see it come back down. Well, if you add the fact that increased resistance is going to be there with my men and women trying to learn the area again and dominate that area again, the recipe for the potential of something bad happening is very real. And so on the personal protection side, knowing that and this is what made me think of the fentanyl piece, knowing that they're going to be out there in these conditions, we're not going to get 20,000 more Border Patrol agents to add on to, as much as I would like to. It takes too long to hire them, and the candidate pool for law enforcement, unfortunately, is just not there right now. So they're not going to be a substantially greater amount of Border Patrol agents out there doing the job. They're still going to be in remote locations. They're still going to be in very extreme temperatures, and they're going to be faced off with a very frustrated and dedicated adversary. So we have to think about the fact that they're going to be in extreme temperatures, and they're going to need ballistic protection. They're going to be exposed to the environments just like everybody else. What can we do on that end to keep them safe? I want to talk about fentanyl because that also reminded me. You know, it's not Axel Foley with his knife digging into a package and, you know, to test if it's cocaine or meth or not. You all know this. It's not marijuana anymore. It's fentanyl, where just a few grains can be lethal. We have to carry Narcan on us now. Yeah. And hopefully somebody gets to you in time before something that we've lost canines, police officers. That's the threat today. That's how amped up. If you wanted to compare and contrast yesterday's threats with today's threats, look at marijuana and look at fentanyl. That's the complexity that has been added to the environment. So now, whether they're stopping a vehicle at a checkpoint or pulling somebody over, they have to be careful whenever they're taking apart a vehicle and looking. They can't inadvertently rip into the package because that could be deadly, not just for them, but if it gets airborne, everybody in that checkpoint or port of entry. We have to start thinking about those protections as well.
Chief, very quickly, because of the numbers we're seeing literally every day on the news, the numbers you described a few minutes ago, for the near term anyway, and by near term I mean probably 2-3 years from now, there's going to be a continuing need of what I refer to as immediate border and counter detention requirements. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the Border Patrol, that's one of the jobs that they've been given also. Encounter, apprehend, process, hold, detain, care, and then hand off at some point to either NGOs, ICE, or whoever we transport them on. How do you see that going forth, especially in a situation where these pathways may go into rural and remote areas? Is that type of support, everything from soft-sided facility, medicals, triaging, is that going to come into play? Do you think that that's going to?
So the reason why I said that our mission has become a bifurcated one is because of what you're talking about. You can call a thing a surge for so long, and then after a while it ceases to be a surge and becomes steady state operations. Mm-hmm. I don't know when this particular surge is going to dissipate or change, but for right now, the logistics involved with that piece of it are the biggest drag on our operations. And so I will tell you that I don't want the ability to hold the same amount of people as ERO or as ICE, because it's, if you build it, they will come. If I have the capacity to hold 20,000 people, I'm going to end up holding 20,000 people. That's just the nature of it. I do need the agility to flex in those holding capabilities where I need them. If the adversary chooses, for example, for tomorrow, it's no longer going to be at Lukeville, mm-hmm. We're going to move to Big Bend sector. If that happens, the ability to break down and move. I'll tell you a big piece that's always our Achilles heel, and this is not just Border Patrol, but this is ERO and everybody, transportation. Mm-hmm. The ability to move folks from the field to the processing areas, do as much processing while en route, taking advantage and maximizing every second of time in custody possible is also key. But if asked, I will tell you, and this is just kind of for your information, I would rather be able to fix the leak than get a bigger bucket to bail the water. And what I'm looking at right now is if we have the pathways in place and the ability to execute on those pathways in a way that gets these folks out of our custody and over to ERO, ORR, the NGOs quicker, that's more meaningful, because that means then I can focus on getting my agents out on patrol where we all need them. So the agility for the holding and the transportation is key. I'm not really looking for a lot more of it.
Okay. I know we're running out of time here, but one quick question also, we talked about it earlier. Pushing out the border, what does that mean to the Chief of the Border Patrol? What is it that you need in order for us to get a better feel, understanding and leading indicators to know what's coming at us at point of origin, transit, hubs, things of that nature.
This is going to be no surprise for anybody in the room, but the ability to be predictive instead of reactive in nature, it's crucial to operations that are going to be effective. Simplest example is, if I know there's a caravan coming when it's in Panama, and as opposed to knowing right when it arrives in El Paso, I'm going to be able to respond to that and manage that better. I'm going to have more time to prepare for it. We already have men and women that are deployed at the attaché offices in different points throughout the world, really, but especially in the Western Hemisphere. Their ability to collect on information as they conduct interviews, to help those host nations, to bolster their border security capability, to identify the bad actors, to keep them from getting to us in the first place. That doesn't just help us do our job better, that keeps everybody safer. A wise person, whenever they were chief of the Border Patrol, talked about how increasing the border security of our partners was beneficial to our own border security because they couldn't use those countries as transit points. It stopped the flow from ever getting to us. That still persists and exists today. We just have more of a footprint internationally. I need to be able to leverage that better.
Yeah, exactly. Chief, very insightful. We really appreciate the time you spent with us. And just to let you know, we're going to sit industry down, and they're going to be in the hot seat because we're going to be posing some of these things that you talked about. What can industry do in the communications arena, common operating picture, emerging threat, the pushing out the border, and common operating picture to the degree that shows us those leading indicators. Thank you. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank
Did you have something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You guys don't ever hear thank you enough, but what you do is truly important. And were it not for the industry leaders out here that were coming up with these ideas that actually helped us do our job better and got my men and women home safe at the end of every shift, we wouldn't be where we are today. So you may never see your actions pay off. Know that they do. Know that these things that you help us, these force multipliers that you come up with, you're saving agent lives. You're saving American lives, and you're helping keep this country safe. You're partners to us, and I want you to know that we see that, and we thank you for it. Thank you.